Okay, then good morning, everyone. Let us start the class. Now, in the last session, we have seen the XML and how to. Just a minute, I'm just presenting my screen. So we have seen the XML as well as the DTT. So we have seen the XML, what XML is, and what is document type definition. That is how to say that which tags to use and how to use those tags. Now, if you look at these, this document on the left-hand side, this is the complete XML document which we have seen in the last class, where we have college as the root tag. Obviously, before college, we have to specify that this is an XML document. So we are using angle brackets, question mark, and XML, followed by the version name and encoding. After that, we have a college tag, which is a root tag. Then what we have is we have information of each student within the student tag with its roll number, name, and department. Now, we have created its corresponding DTD or document type definition. That is a document which defines what tags to use, what attributes can be there in the tag, whether they are valid whether they are required attributes or implied attributes, and whether they can be more than one tag of the same name. That is, we use plus over here. So on the right hand side, you will find the DTD document, which list where we have defined each element and its attributes, if any. Now, how will this XML know, or this XML document know that it has to use this DTD? That is the DTD which is there in on the right hand side. Now, obviously this DTD is written in a different file, and this DTD, let us assume that I have saved this DTD with the name as college.dtd. Always remember that XML documents are saved using .xml as the extension, whereas document type definition files are saved with DTD as the extension. So for this XML file, which we have it over here, for this XML file to know that it has to use this DTD, which is on the right hand side, we have to use a doc type as the tag. Now this tag doc type, and this tag, if you see, it starts with exclamation mark. This is just a comment. It's not an XML tag, it's a comment here. So what we are saying, it's not actually a comment, but we are trying to specify that the document type, this is not actually a comment, but we are trying to specify that this is a document type which uses college, because college is the name there, and even the name we are having as the root tag, and system is the attribute. We are using system, though we don't assign any value, because system means it has to take from the current PC, from the system, retrieve a file which is college.dtt, and this college.dtt, then this is a file name, so it is within double quotes. So now once this XML file is saved, and when this XML file runs in the web browser, what happens is we will get the document, the entire document is validated using that particular DTD. So this is all about what is the document, what is XML file, as well as what is the document type definition for this XML. Now let us move on further. So I'll just minimize these two things, and we will talk or move further with respect to, I'll just stop sharing. And now we will talk about the other things, which is one thing known as the namespace. Now, if you look at that, the XML file, remember, I mean the previous XML file with what we have seen as an example, what happens here is, if, where is it? What happens here is that the DTD has some disadvantages. For example, suppose I am having student as a, what do we call, a tag there, or an element there, a college as a tag or an element there. Now suppose this student may mean a different thing, a different set may have student also. Let us take an example. Let us take college. Some people may say college, some people may say institution, or a college can be used in different other, have some other meaning also at different places. So there is something known as namespace or namespaces. Now namespaces is going to let us define a set of tag which belongs to certain category or a group. Now name is there. Now name can be a student name, or I can have another DTD where a name can be a faculty name. So if I am using a name as a tag, now what will the XML processors, or what will the web browsers, which are XML processors, how will they know that the name tag belongs to a student, a namespace, or it belongs to a faculty namespace? So the same way, a student in one DTD may mean something else, in another DTD it may mean something else. So how are we going to know that which DTD, which tag is for what? What is the meaning of each tag? So that is why there is something known as namespaces, what we have. Namespaces starts with an element name and then XML with respect to the prefix of the namespace. Now let us look at an example here. Just a second. ये सिस्टम चल रहा, ये खाली पड़ा हुआ है, हाँ? खोलो उधर से, देखो. Just a second, let me open another system because I'm just having some problem here. Sharing the देखो कुछ नहीं, हाँ ऐसे लगाते हैं यहाँ. उसमें बोले तो नेटवर्क नहीं आ रहा, तो ये नहीं आ रहा. अरे काम करते, वो सिस्टम चल रहा. नहीं तो जाने छोड़ो, कोई बात नहीं, छोड़ो दूसरी तरीके से देख लेते हैं. Now what do I do? Okay. Is my screen visible? Yeah, I suppose it's visible now. Anyway, let us continue. Now where were we? Okay. Okay. Now let us continue with this. So I'll just increase the font size here. So for example, if we have college, So college tag may mean something else at some place else, as well as in our document it may mean something else. The best example can be of a name. Now this name can belong to a student, or this name can also belong to faculty. So when we are using a name, we may not know what this name is for. That is why we have something known as the namespace. So what we are going to do is to differentiate between the name as the element or the tag in XML, we use XML NS. NS stands for namespace. XML NS, and then with this colon, we can prefix a URI. For example, we can have a prefix, and let us say that this is going to be, let's say, student, and this attribute we are going to have equal to, it's the URI which we have to provide. Now it can be anything. I'm just going to continue this URL on the next line, or on the next line. So let us say the URI is http://mjct, and then slash. Let me say that this is stud dot, or just stud for student, and then close the tag. Then for faculty, I can have the same thing, but a different namespace. That is, I can use XML, or I can use anything. I can use MJ namespace also. I can call this as MJ. Or over here also, instead of XML, I can say MJ namespace NS, and I can use faculty, FACT for faculty, and then have the URI FACT faculty to define its namespace. So now it will be clear that this name tag belongs to student's namespace, or belongs to the name of the student, and this name tag may belong to a name of the faculty. So this is how we can differentiate. Otherwise, what happens is, just using a name over here, we may not know whether this name tag belongs to a student or belongs to a faculty, because there may be several XML documents and there may be several document type definitions, and there may be common what do you call tags or the elements which we may use. Now, not only that, this is just an example I have used, but suppose, let us take an example of, instead of name, let us take another example. Let me say table. Suppose if I have a online store, if I have an online store, let's say online store, and in that for that online store, I'm trying to sell some tables and chairs. So I have elements or tags known as chairs, and the other one known as tables. So now, if you look at the chairs, no problem. For my DTD, there may not be any problem. But what about tables? And I'm using a tag known as table. Now this table tag, for me, in the DTD of online store, it means that there is tables I'm trying to sell, tables, chairs I'm trying to sell. But the same table tag is also present in HTML, which means to create a table, to represent a table there. So how will the processor, XML processor, or how will the web browser know that this table is an HTML tag, or whether this table is a table tag which I have defined in as an online store? So for that reason, we have to use namespaces here. Now, normally what happens is, if this is a tag which is, it is belonging to HTML, because HTML is defined, namespace is defined for HTML. So then I can have, I'm just continuing this over here, namespace, I can have HTTP, because that is where it is defined, www.w3.org. Wait just a minute. w3.org, then it has defined over here actually HTML tag, the namespace, what HTML tag means, /xhtml. So this is the namespace I use to say that this is a table tag which belongs to HTML. So that is what we use is namespace to differentiate where what that tag, to which namespace or which category that tag belongs to. So that is what, always remember that the namespaces are used so that you can differentiate a same name tag with, or the element with the same name belongs to which namespace or which category. Then let us look at the other things there. Now this DTD, as I said, this is one of the disadvantage of using DTD, that there may be many XML documents, there may be many DTD, and may contain several documents may contain elements or tags with the same name. So that is one of the disadvantages. Now the other disadvantage is that the other disadvantage is that the syntax of how XML is used. Now DTD, if you look at a DTD document, which we have it here, somewhere over here, yeah, we have it over here for this XML. If you look at this DTD document, though we are saying that this is an XML document defining its version and all, as we have done in the XML document, but if you really see, this DTD document is not in the proper syntax what XML uses. For example, I told you XML is a well-formed language. So any tag which opens has to close. So college is opening, college is getting closed here. Student is opening, then roll number is opening. So roll number is getting closed first, then student is getting closed. The student tag is getting closed. But if you look at the XML, if you look at the DTD, it's not in a proper XML format. So we are using two different formats, for the one for defining the XML document and the other for defining the DTD or document type definition. Now, which is, I mean, creates a big confusion, because the syntax and specifications are different for defining two different type of documents. So that is one of the disadvantages in using that is one of the disadvantages in using the, what happened here? Okay, anyway, that is one of the disadvantages of using DTDs. So there is something known as XML schemas. So a tags, an XML which uses tags, you can use a DTD to define that tags, or you can also use XML schemas to define those tags. Now, now there is one more disadvantage here when using XML and the DTD. In DTD, for example, when you have a roll number, so all the roll numbers are integers over here, or some numbers, they are number type. And we are just defining the type as PC data, parsable character data. And whereas for names, if you look at the names, we have names as all strings. And for that name also in DTD, we are trying to say that they are parsable character data. Now there is no type defined here. We are not defining any type. So that is one of the another disadvantage in using DTD. That is, we cannot define what type of the text an element will contain. So to handle all these things, what we use is we use something known as XML schemas. We use something known as XML schemas. Now, the very fundamental of this XML schema is that this is just like a defining syntaxes for a programming language. So, I mean, the very first thing is we have to define. We can define the element, and what type of that element it can have, as well as its attributes, or what are the implicit or explicit attributes they can have. So, for example, we can use a string to define the type of the data that element can have, or we can also have numbers as a type there to define whether whether what do you call, type of the element is a number or a decimal or I mean an integer. So let us look at how it happens. Now here we already assume that we have a college as the root tag, and for college we are trying to create an XML document to store the college information. So in this case, what happens is we have to define elements of that. So to define elements, let us we we have is XSD, which is the namespace. That is XML's namespace we are defining. So we will say college. We are defining an XML schema here now for the college, and no, not college actually, sorry, the element. The next thing what we have is name of that element. Name of this element. That name obviously is going to be in quotes because name is an attribute there. And what will be its type? Now college doesn't have a type, so there is no problem. We just try to close this. We just try to close this with /n. Then again, same way, we can use XML schema to define, let's say, student as the other thing. For example, here in this XML document, you can see we have a student as a tag. Now let us look at these two tags, which one is where one is the string, the other one is the. Okay. Now this I'm just removing this. I just copied and pasted, so I'm just trying to remove this one. Now let us define college. So we will use roll number, XSD colon element. And what is the name of that element? Roll number. So we will have name equal to, within double quotes, we have roll number. Then now roll number contains data of what type? Integers. It contains integers as a type. So what we have is so we will use type as the attribute. And for this type, what we need to do is we need to define a type which is already there in XSD. That is the default there. So is a roll number now roll number is type number there. So what we can do is numbers are represented through decimal. So I'm trying to define, and then at the end I will close this tag /angle bracket. So decimal means it's going to have numbers. It's going to represent numbers. Now then, for what about name? So I'm going to copy this and paste it here. And for this name, this is the name is the attribute there, but here name I'm defining as a tag element or a tag. This name is not decimal. Every time we are going to have strings there. So we will define what is the type. That is, the type is string over here. Then there is not only name and the string as the two types. We have several types here. The type can be a string, or let me just rewrite this. First, we have seen a type as decimal. Decimal is used to define numbers, even the floating point number. So that is why we are using decimal. Or you can have type as string. Or we can have type as a boolean. Type as a boolean. So not only that, there is also a type known as time to define date and time there. So these are different types that we can use, which are defined in XML schema. to tell that the element is going to have data of these types. Now this is not there, or we cannot do this in document type definition. So this is an advantage over using XML namespace over using the document type definition. Then the next thing what we have is we can also give fixed values to the elements there, and so on and so forth. Now the next thing is, how do we use? What is our purpose of doing all this? Defining a document type, DTD, or defining a XML namespace. The purpose of this is to communicate the data through XML. So a large of amount of data can be communicated using XML document. Right here, let us look at once a data is communicated. Obviously, that data has to be understood by something which can translate an XML into user understandable form. For example, all HTML tags. If we have all HTML tags, then there is no problem. A browser understands them and then displays them. Now let me try to open this XML document inside a web browser. Because to execute XML documents, our web browser actually understands XML documents, so we will be able to open the XML document within a web browser. So let me first do one thing. Let me just rename this file, this XML file. Let me say that save as, not as text, as an XML document itself. So I'm going to save this as sample.xml. I'm saving that as sample.xml. Okay, I got this one. Now this sample.xml file I'm going to open in a web browser. So I have a Chrome web browser. Now this should have opened here. Open with let me use a Chrome browser. So I just increase the font of this browser. So if you look at this output, and here we have this array, and here we have the student sample. Where is sample? Here. Oh, yeah, no. Where is this now? Now you can see this is our XML document which I am highlighting right now. This is the XML document, and when we are executing this XML document, you get the result displaying the same XML document, except that this is like a tree form. So I can just explore this student tag, or the student element. I can explore the student element, and then the whole college is actually defined inside this. When I open this college, it forms a hierarchy. Student gets displayed. This is the first student. Then we have this data of the next student and data of the third student. Now, if you look at this, it is the same data. What we have written is getting displayed here. But for a user, when user receives this data, user will not be able to understand this data because tags are also getting defined, seen there. So how do we present this document? If we use HTML tags, obviously it creates a table. You may create a table, or you may directly list those tags. Directly list that data. But here, since we are using XML to transmit data, or XML to send data from a client and to a server, so how do we present this data? How do we without tags, how does the data look like? Now there are two ways of doing this. One way is to use an XML CSS with the XML. That is what we call as displaying raw XML data. That is what we call it as displaying raw XML data. So one way is to display XML data using CSS, and the other way is to use XSLT, XML Style Sheet Transformation Language, or XSLT is the transformation of XML style sheet. Like we have style sheets for the HTML document, that is cascading style sheet CSS. The same way we have the styles for XML. So first, let us look at how to display an XML using CSS, using CSS part. Now, for that, I have a file. Why is it opening in? Where is the XML doc? Okay, here. Now I already have created an XML file. Sorry, we are looking at an XML file. Just a minute, let me remove this statement. We already have seen this XML file where we created college and students. Now I've created a corresponding XML CSS file. I've created a corresponding CSS file. So here I have roll number as a tag, which has the element. Which has the data 101. I have name, which has ABC. So what I'll do is, I will create a CSS with normal. This is my user-defined tag, so I'm using roll number there, and I have color as red, defined the font size as 20, and I'm using display as a block. So, and margin and so things I'm displaying. This so and so format I want for my styles. The same way I have a name tag defined here. So that name tag also I'm defining in a CSS. So I'm defining the style sheet for CSS. So I'll use the tag name, open the bracket. Here I'm just saying blue. This name is blue with the font as bold and so 16 points, and it's a block. And some margin, whatever we want, we can give anyway. So this is the CSS which we have defined. So you might remember that for HTML, we have defined CSS for a particular HTML tag, for example, h1 or para tag and so. But here, since we are having our user-defined tags like your roll number, name, which contain some data, student tag doesn't contain any data. Student tag contains subnodes, that is roll number, name, and department. Those tags contains data, but as such, student tag doesn't contain any data. So here we have defined two things, name and roll number. That is, we have defined styles for name and roll number. We have not defined style for department, DEPT. We have not defined for department. Now what we say is, this XML document, what we have having, we will display the contents of this XML document using CSS. So here, this XML should know which CSS to use. So that is why we have a tag which starts with angle bracket and question mark and XML. And then this XML is not a tag actually. The complete thing, XML hyphen style sheet, is a tag. This is an XML tag, but we have another tag for an XML document which is predefined, known as XML hyphen style sheet. And then type is an attribute. We say that this is a text and CSS document. And where is that document? href. That is, we are writing an external CSS document. So we are calling an external CSS document. That is why href is used for referencing, and the name of that CSS. So I have defined the CSS, what you are seeing here, what you've been seeing over here in this file. I have defined this file with the name as students.css because CSS has, I mean, style sheet files has got an extension as CSS. So I'm defining students.css over here. So what happens now is this file is going to take the CSS, student CSS, and display the data according to its format, what we have defined in CSS or students as for student styles. So let me execute this program now. I mean, execute this XML file. Now this is my XML file which I have. I'll just open this in a web browser. क्या है भाई ये राइट क्लिक नहीं काम करता इसका हाँ बाबा राइट क्लिक ही नहीं काम कर रहा है इसका अरे यार रहने दो चल रही क्लास रहने दो anyway, sorry for this. I'm actually using a different system what I used to use. So now right click is not coming, so I'm not able to show you the how that now it's working here. But let me again open that file and let me look at it whether it works or not. I'll just open this file in a web browser. Now here it's not working. Anyway, so what happens is I'll explain you theoretically. Now here roll number is there, so we have specified color as red, so this data 101 is going to be displayed in red. In the same way, what we have is font size is 20, so it is going to be a little bigger one. At the same time, there is a what do you call a margin there, so I mean there will be a space between there's a left margin of 10 pixels. In the same way, name, so all roll numbers, that is 101, 102 and 103 will be in red color with 20 point size. Then for name, what we have used is we have used color as blue, and I defined it to be 16 and bold. So what we are going to have here is all the names, that is ABC, ABD and ABF, all the names, that is the text value of names, are going to be in blue color, bold and with 16 points. So this is how you will be able to use an XML, that is the same XML. If you look at this XML, we have the same XML, and we are trying to associate a styles to this XML so that data can be displayed on the web browser. So student CSS we have created, and this student CSS what we have created over here, actually we are trying to define the styles for our own tags, our own defined tags, that is roll number and name. We have not defined for department, though we can also define for department as well. But you have to make sure that whatever XML you have to use angle : XML - style sheet as the tag, and define the type as text CSS, and then give the reference of the file name where we have written CSS code. That is, in this case, it is students.css. So this way we will be able to display data to the user. Now the other way of displaying data is using the XSLT, that is XSL style sheets. XSLT. Now this is similar to what do we call our CSS, but this uses XML syntax and format. There are certain special XML tags with its namespace that are used to define style sheets. Now XSLT stands for extensible, X is for extensible, style sheet, S, style sheet language, and T is for transformation. So XSL is for extensible style sheet language. This is same as your CSS, but this is for XML documents. Though CSS can be used both for XML as well as for HTML. But usually what happens is we use CSS only for HTML. And with XML, if you have to, style or present the data of your XML document, then we can do it as a raw XML. What you are looking at this case, or we can use the raw XML. We can use the raw XML with the CSS, though that output was not coming on this browser. It's not working, but I explained you how the output looks like. And the third way is to use an XSL transformation, that is extensible style sheet language transformation. This is specifically for XML documents. Now this let us look at a sample example of this transformation here. Now here, this is a little bit tricky, and it's not that convenient to use as we have seen the CSS. Now here what happens is that the right, this part, the right side XML file, what you are saying is not an actual XML file, but it is a style sheet, XSL file. It says XSL file. Remember, XML files are stored or saved using an extension .xml. XSLT or XSL, extensible XML style sheet files are saved with the extension XSL, extension XSL. Now here we have the same tags which we are seeing, but now here these tags we will be applying using XML style sheet, or we will display using XML style sheet. Now if you look at this document, the XSL document, this document is purely written using the syntax and semantics of XML. That is, all the tags are XML tags. They are XML tags. So the very first thing you can find here is the XML with its version and encoding, what we have seen for XML itself. Then the very first thing is we have to define what style sheet we will be using. Now this thing, this whole thing itself is a tag. XSL : style sheet is a tag there. We are saying we are using 1.0 as the version. Then the namespace for this XSL is from W3org. W3org transform as whatever, as well as the other tags which we will be using is coming from the namespace XHTML or HTML tags, what we say, HTML things, which contains the attributes as well as its tag values. Now we will come back later over here to look at what this means. Why are we including this, and what does actually the namespace means over here. Now the very first thing we need to define is what is the root tag of your the XML document. Root tag is the college. Now this college tag is not going to get repeated. We are just going to use only once college tag, because that's the root tag, and that root tag is going to end it at the end, or close it at the end. So XSL, extensible style sheet or XML style sheet, now uses XSL : template. This itself is a tag. Template itself is a tag with the attribute as match. Now what to match? From this XML document, we are matching the college tag. We are matching the college tag. Then the next thing what we have over here is just a minute. What happened now? Okay. Anyway, the next thing what we have here is I'm just having an HTML tag. H2 is an HTML tag to display students detail. I will just remove MJCT students. I'll just say students detail. So now if you look at this style sheet, I am also incorporating HTML tags. I can do that. To present the document, I can do that. Now here, the student details will just get displayed as it is. So this is the very first thing which is going to get displayed on the web browser. Then, where is this HTML tags coming from? This HTML tags are coming from this namespace. That is w3.org. 1999 is their date to which the XML was, this namespace was written. So don't worry about that. But what we have at the end is XHTML. So this is the namespace where all the HTML, the meanings of all the HTML tags are defined. So that is why I am able to use H2 tag, header tag in this style sheet, XSL style sheet. Then what about this XSL template match? Now, match is an attribute. Anyway, what is this XSL template? This is also a tag. In the same way, we have a tag XSL for each. This for each works like a for loop for each. Now, where are these tags defined, or where is it defined that what these tags do? That is the template I said. This XSL template is a tag which tries to match the college. That is, our processing of styling should start from this college tag. Then I'm saying XSL for each is a tag. It actually works like works like a for loop. Whereas what these tags does, where is it defined? It is defined in this namespace where we are using XML NS. NS is for namespace. XML, NS is for namespace, XSL. It is defined over here. The specifications are defined over here. So the browser actually understands what to do because of this namespace. The namespace, what we are saying. So all the XSL tags, all the tags which starts with XSL and that is template for each. Then we have value of all these tags, the meaning and specification, or it's how they work are how they work is defined inside this namespace. Now let us continue. So student detail will be displayed on the web page. That is the first thing. Then we have an XSL for each tag. Now I said for each tag works as a for loop. Select is an attribute. Select is an attribute. Now for each, it has to loop for which each tag? It has to loop for student tag. So we have multiple student blocks. This is one, this is the second one, this is the third one. So this for each, starting from here till here, is just like a loop. This for each is going to execute each time we encounter a student tag. Now within the student tag, what are we doing? We will first simply display a roll number. Now remember, this is a text. This is nothing to do with the roll number tag or element what you have. This is small r and n. This is just the text we are displaying as roll number in italics format. So you can say that span is a tag. You can see this span is a tag, like div and span we use. We are using span as a tag and closing the span tag. This span tag is an HTML tag. It has got nothing to do with XML. And the style what we are trying to provide here is italics. Then we have the next tag as XSL value of. Now this value of is an XSL style sheet tag. Now this tag, again we have select. So as in for each we have selected the element there. Even here select value of means retrieve the value which is present in roll number. So what is the roll number? What is the element is the roll number? What is the value present? It is 101 for the first one. So 101 will be retrieved here. And then we have a break tag which is an HTML tag. The next thing we want to retrieve is ABC. But before retrieving ABC, we use an HTML tag span and we just have a text as name. And we are having italics. Though you can have any style over here. I'm just using italics there. Any style over here. So name just will get displayed as it is. Then ABC is retrieved using XSL colon value of. Because in select attribute, we are trying to select the value of the element which is name. Then the last thing we are retrieving is the department. So again, we are just displaying DEPT and department, and then it's italics, then retrieving the value of, we are selecting department as the element, DEPT as the element. So this entire thing for the first time is going to display, retrieve all these values and display on the web browser. Then this for each will, it's a loop, I said, it works, it executes, it works as a loop, so it executes again. Do we have a student again? Do we have another student tag? Yes, we have another student tag. So all these statements are executed again until we come to the last student tag where all these elements are retrieved, 101, AHC, whatever it is, and CSE are retrieved. And then the next time when this loop executes, that is the for loop executes, there is no student tag. So the display, so the for loop executes, terminates, and we end the display. I mean, we end the output of this. What do we call? We have retrieved all the values from the elements, XML elements, and we are trying to display them. So this is, I mean, using XSL, XML style sheet is little tricky than using the CSS, but we can achieve a much better formatting using XSL. And then remember that, and finally, we are closing this for each using slash for each. Here XML value of is closed here itself, but whereas for each we have to close it here, and then we had a template tag, so we will be closing the template tag, as well as this XSL style sheet tag we have. This XSL style sheet tag we are closing it over here. So this way we write an XML style sheet program. Now this entire program or this entire XML style sheet has to be called from this XML. It has to be called from this XML. Now assume that I have saved this file using XSL student.xsl. I have to save it with XSL as the extension. Now here, if you look at this part, I'm using style sheet type CSS, href, and we are using CSS. So this XML right now is using CSS. Now instead of that, I can have where is it now? So instead of this, I can have the same tag, XML style sheet type text. Now here I was using CSS in the earlier when we were providing the styles using CSS or displaying the XML document using CSS. But here I will be using XSL, XML style sheet or extensible style sheet language. And then instead of calling the CSS file, I will call, let us call this as students.xsl file. So this is only the difference between using, I mean, in your XML, calling a CSS or calling a XML style sheet language. So if you are calling language, then you will be using this way, text/XSL, and we will call the XSL file. So these are the two different ways you can display or or you can present the data present inside the XML document. That is using CSS and using XSL. Now, anyway, I'll upload these programs, the sample programs, on the Google, Classroom, so that and the how it works, what is the result. I'm not able to show you the result of CSS as well as the result of that XSL because this browser is not working here when I'm trying to open it. I'm actually on a different system today because of some clash with the labs and other things. So anyway, next class, before we proceed further, I'll show you the outputs of these two, how a raw XML looks like, and how an XML with the CSS looks like, and how an XML with the XSL style sheet or XML style sheet looks like. So anyway, I'll show you the outputs in the next session or next class. But anyway, let us continue with it. So this is what we have as the XSL. Now, if you look, am I still sharing my presentation? Still sharing my window? Yes, I suppose. I'm still sharing that. Where is it? Yeah, okay. Yes, I'm still sharing my screen. So anyway, let us continue with the other aspects or topics. Now, actually, how this transformation works is, if you look at this diagram, I'll just expand it, make it bigger. Now, if you look at this diagram, what actually happens is we are having something known as the very first thing is we are having something known as the XML document, and then you have seen Xslt document, that is XSL document, which with the XSL colon template colon for each, that is the document. Now these two documents are given to an Xslt processor. So these two documents, an XML and XSL style sheet document, are given to a processor known as Xslt processor. Now, where is this processor? This is process actually nowadays all the browsers are supporting this. All the latest browsers are supporting this processor. The purpose of this processor is to take an XML document and take an XSL document and transform an XML into a displayable document. So we had template there. So college template matched. Then for each we have had student. So student tags or elements match. Then from that we are retrieving value for the roll number, value for the name, value for the department. So all this processing is done in Xslt processor or done using Xslt processor. And the output of this processor will be an extensible or XML style sheet language document or extensible style sheet language document, which is displayable to the user, which user can see. And where does it get displayed? This XSL, that is the output, this XSL document gets displayed on the web browser itself. So this is how the processing happens. When we have an CSS to display the data, there is no Xslt processor involved here. The browser, what it does is it will take an XML document, it will take, instead of Xslt, CSS document, and then directly display the output on the web browser. So even here also we have the same process, but Xslt processor is used. That is, within the browser we have a processor, and that processor displays the document or creates a document known as XSL document, which is displayed on the web browser. So that is what we have with respect to the XML. Now XSL style sheet. So always remember, CSS is the style sheet, cascading style sheet for HTML elements or HTML tags, whereas XSL, extensible style sheet language, is the CSS or styling part for XML documents. Now then, the last thing which is left in the in this is the XML processors. Now there are several processors, XML processors, or what XML processor actually is. It is actually a, what do you call, um, a program which tries to check whether XML is a valid or not. It tries to check whether XML is a well-formed or not, or which tries to check whether the tags are in proper syntax and semantics or not. So those are the that is the XML processors. Now the purpose of XML processors always obviously is to take the DTD, is to apply that DTD on XML, as well as take the the XML namespace, or take the XML namespace and then apply those namespace onto the onto XML tags. Now here for XML, we have two things. One is the DOM processor, that is document object model. The other one is the SAX processor, or what we call it as the SAX. DOM and SAX are the two things for handling the XML documents. Now DOM, you all know, document object model, it creates a tree. So if I open up this, now where is it? अरे यार, अरे ये क्या तो भी है जी, खाली सिस्टम आ now it doesn't work. Oh, now it's working. Okay, so this is what you have seen over here is nothing but it's the DOM. It's a tree is getting created. So if you look at this is a college, is the root tag. When I open college, we have other tags which is like students. So if I open the student tag, I get all the elements of the student. So this is like a DOM. It's like a tree there, and in the hierarchical format. Then the next thing what we have is the SAX. SAX is it stands for Simple API for XML. SAX stands for Simple API for XML, and SAX is much better than approach of SAX, or handling XML documents using SAX is much better than, or advantages than, using a DOM. Now what SAX does is it's like an event processing. Whatever element is selected, then the an API is used, or the URL is used. So we have an API to only retrieve or fetch that part of the tag. So for example, if you look at this the whole document, in this one what happens is I have a college, I have student and roll number, so and so. So suppose if I have to fetch a roll number, then it's like I'm having an event. I'm trying to create an event on that element roll number. So and if it's in SAX, only that part of the tag or that part of the information gets retrieved. Suppose if I am trying to search for a student, so this whole block gets retrieved for the student. I mean, obviously one after the other, and then so I can access the information how as I want. So I'll be triggering events there, and using those events, an API is called. That is what is SAX, Simple API for XML, and only that part of the data we are going to retrieve or handle or process. But whereas in DOM, the entire document has to be loaded, has to be processed at a time. Now the problem here is that now here we are only having 5 students or 6 students here in this XML document. But suppose if all the students of Osmania University are there in the XML document, then obviously what happens, the document becomes very large. The amount of data it should handle becomes very large. And when we try to use DOM over there, since the entire data has to be loaded, the processing using DOM becomes slower. It becomes slower because it consumes, much of the memory. But whereas SAX is there, the entire document is not considered at once. It is not taken into consideration or not loaded in the memory at once. But as and when the tags or elements are accessed, those elements are fetched, the data of those elements are fetched, and the processing happens. So there is no need as such for a web browser to load the entire XML file in the memory when using SAX. But when we use DOM, the entire document has to be loaded in the memory. So the processing becomes very slow or very much slower. So that is what is there are two approaches of handling XML documents. One is the SAX and the other one is DOM. So we have processors, XML processors created using SAX or DOM parsers. So that is what we have seen in last three classes, three sessions. We have seen the the XML. We talked about how the XML structure is there, DTD, XML namespaces, schemas, as well as how to handle raw XML documents, how to handle XML with CSS, and how to handle XML with Xslt, and what are XML processors. So obvious, and one thing is left out, that I was not able to show you the output of XML document using CSS and XML document using Xslt. So in the next session or next class, obviously I will be using the normal system which I used to use. There I have all the things installed and built in, and it's much easier, faster there. So before we start the next topic in the next class, I'll first show that, and then we will move on to the next topic of J2EE architecture, or what J2EE is. So anyway, let me so we will end this session today, and then what else, if you have any questions you can ask me. I'm just stopping the presentation there, and if you have any questions, just you can ask in the chat. Let me just check up here. I'm having all the roll numbers. Then okay, there is a question here. Xslt is part of XSL, or does it also stand for another independent language? No, it doesn't stand for another independent language. Actually, to get XSL, that is XML style sheet language, we have to use Xslt, or we have to transform that. So XSL, we write an XSL, actually a file, what you have seen for each template and all, that doesn't directly give you an output. That has to be processed, like a source code has to get compiled, and then you can execute that. The same way we use XSL document, that is, we call it as Xslt document. Actually, that Xslt document uses Xslt transform, some processor which transform that using the XML into an XSL. So XSL and Xslt are not two different languages, or not two different individual things. They are both same. Actually, one is the transformation, and you get the actual styles. So that, I hope I have clarified the question. Is there any other thing? Any other question? No. If there are no questions, then okay. Then Ari, so many have left. Anyway, now we need to have some more extra classes. So today afternoon we cannot have, because I'm having a lab again, some lab for some other year. So anyway, I'll inform you on the group, and if everyone agrees, then we will have. Otherwise, we will have a class in the normal days next Monday, I suppose. Obviously, I think this week We may not have time because I have other labs to complete. So anyway, in the next week we'll look at how to, take some extra classes with the original work and do it, complete the syllabus. So anyway, we will end this session today or now with the XML.